All right, so back to this. In this podcast, I talk about running a photography business, and it is hugely rewarding, but there are a lot of things to learn when it comes to running any type of creative business. And most of the things that we need to learn as photographers and just creative entrepreneurs don't have anything to do with what we do when we're holding our camera. And today I want to talk about some of these lessons I learned from my very best clients, how I found them, what the experience was in working with them, and what I learned as a result. I can't wait to tell you some of my favorite client stories, so let's get started. Hi there, I'm so glad that you are with me today. My name is Dorie Howell, and I've been a portrait photographer in the Northern Virginia area, right outside of Washington, D.C., for almost 11 years now, and I've had a lot of clients come through the door. Some of them have been really, really memorable, and they've become my favorite for a variety of reasons. And I bet you were thinking that today I would tell you all about my biggest sales. And I don't want to burst your bubble, but no. Today, I want to talk about my favorite clients. And believe it or not, becoming a Dorie Howell photography favorite has nothing to do with the amount of the sale. And the clients that I want to talk to you about today are the young couple, the established millionaire, the new couple, and the single mom. And I learned something very specific from each of these types of clients. And when I'm talking about them, of course, I'm not going to give you any identifying information, but I am going to refer to them. And I am thinking of someone very specific in my mind when I'm speaking of them today. So I want to start with the young couple. The young couple found me on Google, and I remember the day that the husband called me for this session. He sounded very young, and he was from a different culture, but I couldn't really place the culture over the phone. So sometimes when people call me in the Washington D.C. area, it's very common to get people calling me that don't sound like me, don't look like me, or from a wide variety of different places all over the world. And a lot of accents I can place. And he had an accent that I couldn't place. But he was very polite, and he was super, super excited that his wife was going to be giving birth to a new baby boy. And it was going to be the first baby boy of this generation. It was very, very exciting. We set up the entire thing over the phone, and they arrived at the studio ready to go for her maternity session. They were on time. They were dressed. Their hair was done. They looked good. They were in good spirits. And I invited them in. But it was immediately apparent that the mom was not going to speak to me directly about anything at all. Nothing. I could ask her a direct question. She would whisper it to her husband, and then he would respond to me. That's kind of weird, right? Like, whatever, but I could deal with it. Just kind of a different way of communicating with clients. And we had a great maternity session, and we had a beautiful newborn session. They brought their parents to the newborn session, which is really, really common in a lot of the different cultures that I serve. And I don't necessarily always show those images in my portfolio, but if you're dealing with a client from a different culture, a lot of times the grandparents will come, especially if it's in a culture where it's the first grandchild, and that first grandchild is a boy. That's just the way it is. So the grandparents came, and even with 5 adults in the room, the only people who spoke to each other were my client and myself, the husband and myself. Everybody else was perfectly quiet. It was really weird. And I left like I ended that session thinking that they hated everything. That was just my gut reaction of this particular session. Now, keep in mind that during my sessions and when they're in the studio, I have several pieces of wall art. I have albums out. I have other photographic items that my clients can look at during the newborn session to get ideas of the things that they might want to purchase for their home and for their family. And I referenced them for them to look at, and they didn't look at a thing. They didn't look at anything. They just watched me work with the baby. And after they left, we scheduled their ordering appointment. And but after that, I felt defeated, like I said. They weren't gushing about how cute the baby was, and they weren't laughing at how the little poses that I did. And they just chose not to communicate directly with me at all. I was certain that this sale was going to be a bomb. 100% was going to be a bomb. And I wasn't looking forward to the ordering appointment. But when the day came, they actually left the baby at home and said they were going to go on a date afterwards, which I think was great. And I was pleasantly surprised in the fact that they had read all the information that I had given to them about the appointment, which we all know was very, very rare. I had communicated it to them, but they'd also gone home and read it and studied it. So they knew exactly what to expect, which was so great. So as part of my workflow in this sales appointment, before we get really started, I ask them what they want to do with their images. What are they thinking about? What are they considering? How can I help them make their decisions? What do they want to display in their home? And without missing a beat, she said, we want 4 of those that you have hanging up over the couch right there. We want 1 album and 4 canvases. Well, I almost choked. First of all, she speaks. It seemed like a miracle. She actually spoke out loud. I could hear her and understand everything that she said, which of course made me want to ask her, like, well, why haven't you spoken to me the other 2 times that we've met? But I didn't. I just, was pleasantly surprised. And I said, okay, great. And they were a very young couple, barely out of college. And I made some judgments on them about what they could afford and what they were going to be interested in. And so after catching my breath and the realization that she actually said something to me, I said, well, the metal that's over my couch, that's a metal wall portrait, and that size is 30 by 40 inches. And I gave her the price. And at that point in time, it was around $1,600. And they said, okay, that's great. And because I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page, I reiterated the prices of the album and the canvases and everything as well. And they just kept nodding their head and saying, yes, yes, yes. So at the end of the appointment, they ordered those 4 30 by 40 medals of different images. And I have to tell you, newborn images, they were at least full. Some were full baby shots, and one was just a picture of the baby's face. And they were ginormous. Like 30 by 40 of a baby, when the baby on the medal was actually like kind of more like the size of a toddler. And the baby's face was literally probably 24 inches across. I thought it was comical. They loved it. They loved it so much. So an album, canvases, the 4 metal prints, they paid for it in cash. And I just threw the digitals in there because I was so astonished that they purchased so much that I kind of lost my head for a minute, right? But what did I learn in this experience with this young couple that was so generous with me and so kind? Number 1, don't prejudge your clients. And we do this all the time. And there's different examples that I have of this coming up as well. Even when the clients look simple, when they look uneducated, when they look like they can't afford you, don't take any of those outside appearances and think that they have anything to do with the amount that they will spend or the amount of money that's in their checking account. All right. Secondly, just because they don't talk much doesn't mean that they don't love what you are doing, right? They didn't talk to me. I had no idea I was going to get this reaction. It totally caught me off guard. So that's not an indication of if they don't love what you're doing. I see sometimes in our group of people saying, well, they really didn't say anything. It doesn't matter. Everybody communicates differently. And the third thing that I learned was that people who live in small 2-bedroom apartments, they want wall art too. And that's what this couple, they lived in a very small 2-bedroom apartment. And I still envision this day, those giant medals and all those canvases all around their wall. And they loved everything. They loved everything. Okay, so that's client number 1. My next favorite client is the new millionaire. They were a beautiful family. They lived in a house that cost several $1,000,000. They had received this windfall of new money in a business transaction. How do I know that? I Google my clients, and I suggest everybody Google their clients. It just gives you an idea to see if they've been in the news, if they've done anything newsworthy, anything that you might want to know, if they've been arrested for anything. You find out a lot of interesting information. They've Googled you, so you should Google them. I learned that she was on social media, but not very much. And she was very worried in speaking with her about appearances and doing things the right way, according to her new place in society. She liked the images that she had gotten when she used a previous newborn photographer, but she didn't like the way the products had turned out. So I'm like, oh, I can excel in this. So she definitely hired the right person. But I knew that I also had some expectations to fulfill, and I wanted to make sure that I did a really great job. The one thing that I noticed about her, as lovely as she was still kind of stuck in a do-it-yourself mentality to save money, which they didn't really need to do based on the amount of money that was public knowledge, not including money that may not have been public knowledge. She really thought, well, I'm just going to get, this was her thing, just like we do all the time. I'm just going to get the digitals because I'm going to order some of these things that I saw that I wanted last time that I got from a lab. And I said, okay, great. Well, I know that's a lot of work. So if there's anything I can help you with, let me know. But she wanted to do things herself, and that's fine. And even though she had 3 nannies, a night nurse, a house manager, and full-time housekeepers, she had a limited idea of the ways that I could help her display her beautiful family in their gorgeous home. And she thought she had all the best ideas herself, and she really wasn't open to anything that I suggested or specifically anything new. She had had an experience in the past of what she wanted, and she wanted to do that same thing again. And part of me believes that's because she wanted to play it safe. And the another thing is that she needed to look perfect in all her images. And that was something that I learned the hard way, that what I viewed as perfect and what she viewed as perfect was very, very different. So, what are some of the things I learned with my favorite millionaire client? Okay. Just because people have extensive help and will spend money freely in one area, they still can have limits on what they are comfortable spending in other areas. She was fine with all the help that she had in the house, but her family portraits were not something that she saw as a generational investment. So she didn't see the reason why she needed to invest in top of the line vendors and products and that type of thing. She was still in more of a do it yourself type of mindset when it came to photo sessions and that type of thing. So, and she wasn't familiar with how I discussed them or even sold them. She was just used to getting the digital file on a disc. And she was a little bit more stuck in her ways and her believing of how I could help her. And just because they ticked off all the boxes with the looks, the income, the houses, the cars, etc., it doesn't mean that they don't all have insecurities that we have, and realizing that our job is to make them feel like they look great. And I think this is a really important distinguishing factor, especially when it comes to retouching our portraits. It doesn't matter if we think they look great. They need to feel like they look great. So having some of those conversations about retouching, and some of them can feel awkward. If you do it in a way that you are just wanting them to love the finished image, people are not going to be offended. So, for example, when she said she wanted the dark color of her roots fixed for her hair, she meant it as erased. She wanted no more dark color in her roots. I interpreted that as being reduce, kind of blend in the color. Clarifying that would have been a really, really good thing for me to do, and it would have saved me a lot of time in going back and forth with her on her roots. Because there were some images, when moms are looking down at babies and that type of thing, where the roots were visible, and I had a very different idea of what that meant with her, and having to fix that. And had I asked those clarifying questions ahead of time, I would have been ahead of the game as far as retouching goes, and we would have probably had a smoother experience for both of us. Okay, so back to my next favorite clients, and this one is the new couple. All right. And this one was different for me. A woman called and said that she wanted to have a session at her home with her partner because they were celebrating their year anniversary, their first year anniversary. She had very specific ideas about the posing and placement of the photographs and was really excited to do this as a surprise for her partner. Now, when she suggested some of the posing ideas, I have to admit I didn't love them. It's kind of like when someone sends you a Pinterest board of a whole bunch of other photographers' work and then they want you to duplicate it. Like it kind of like ruffles our feathers a little bit. And they were a same-sex couple. I wanted to show their relationship in a fresh, fun way. And she said she did too, but let's just say that sitting out on a pile of logs looking into the closed up swimming pool, clinking wine glasses, wasn't the same idea of fun that I had. And for those of you who don't live in this part of the world and you don't really know what a closed up pool looks like, people in, I don't know, California, Nevada, Arizona, Florida, parts of Texas, like your pools don't close. It's not pretty. A closed up pool is not pretty. It usually has some water drain. The water that's left in it is pretty green, probably has a cover on it for safety, and usually has a ton of leaves or debris on it. It's not a picturesque thing that you really want in your images. But guess what? She was the client, and I was determined to get them a session that they loved. So on the day of the session, it went off without a hitch. They were super excited for me to be there, and we had a great session. We did incorporate her ideas um, in the images. And keep in mind that when the selection appointment came, they loved all of the ideas, and it was a really, really great sale. So, what did I learn for this client? Well, working with non traditional families and couples is nothing to be scared of. And I know there's a lot of fear out them when you haven't done it before. Treat them with love and listen to their ideas. Be open when maybe you want to do something that they are unsure of, and let them suggest ways that they are most comfortable showing their affection for each other. Trust your equipment to do your job was the other thing, because I'm like, how am I going to get this pool? Like, this pool is just hideous. Well, if you're shooting with a good camera and you have a 1.2 lens on, guess what? Even a closed down, dirty swimming pool can look pretty good if your lens is open enough to blur it out. And that is exactly what I did. I was not going to have that ugly swimming pool in those pictures so you could see what it was. So we just opened up that lens and let it go. All right. The last favorite client of mine that I have is the single mom. In the photography industry, we love to show the traditional family unit. And I feel that this does a huge disservice to so many of the families that are together with only one parent. Mom or dad, male or female, it doesn't matter, but there's just one adult living in that house with a bunch of great kids. Parents want great photos with their kids. So I believe that we need to do a better job at showing families that do not meet the traditional standards in our portfolios. The single client, the single mom that I'm thinking of that I love working with so much, the first time we did a session, I was sending her all the information that we needed for the ordering appointment. And I got a response back for the reminder appointment that just kind of goes out automatically. I don't really think about it too much at all. And it says something in there, that the studio accepts Visa, MasterCard, those types of things. And she replied back, she said, "Don't worry, Dorie, I'm going to be there and my credit card is ready to go." And I just laughed so hard because she got it. She understood what the process was. She knew what was going to be happening. She was excited to be a part of it. So, what did I learn from this client? There's a whole market out there that I feel is underrepresented in our portfolios, in our social media, and in our marketing. We need to do a better job in letting them know that we see them and their family memories are just as important as everybody else's. Just because the family doesn't look like yours doesn't mean that family unit doesn't deserve what we have to offer. And we need to represent that across the board in all of our marketing campaigns. I believe that's really, really important, that we don't make people feel less than or underrepresented because they're not represented in our portfolio. If it's a genre that you serve, I'll just say that, if it's a genre that you serve. So those are my 4 favorite clients. And they were my favorite for a few different reasons. Mostly they were my favorite because in that transaction with them, I learned something about myself or about my business that I needed to change or improve upon. Were all the sales from these 4 clients pretty good? Yeah, I'll be honest, they were. They were pretty good. They're not at the top of the list for my studio, but they were very good clients. But they were fun to work with. I learned something about my business, how I could improve. And I want to challenge you anytime, every client that you have, make sure that you're reflecting back on the full experience with them, seeing areas where you can improve, and that will just make your studio better and better and better.